Okay, so this is a quick review of the chapter on group communication from your distributed operating systems for your final exam. So let's look at what kind of questions you can expect during your final exams. So you are definitely going to have definitions. So you need to know the definitions of what a group is, what an open group is, what a closed group is, what a peer-to-peer group is, and what a hierarchical group is. Right? So you should be able to define each of these types of groups, and you should be able to give an example of each of these groups. Now, we have looked at 4 different types of multicasts: atomic, ordered multicast, IP multicast, and application layer multicast. So you should be able to define in a single line or two each of these types of multicasts: atomic, ordered, IP and IP multicast, and the application layer multicast. So moving on, you should basically know the 2 kinds of atomic multicast: basic and the reliable multicast. So you should be able to define what a basic one is and what is a reliable multicast. You just need to simply know that reliable multicast supports any failures, and basic one does not assume there would be any failures in the system. All right, so you need to know how a regular atomic multicast works. You do not need to remember this code, but you do need to know how it works, and you should be able to explain in simple words, right? Like the sender's program involves sending a message to every one of the members in the group, and once a member receives it, they're going to accept it if they haven't received it before, and then multicast it to the other members, and if they have already received it before, they're going to just discard it. So you should be able to describe this in simple words. Now moving forward, you should be able to tell the difference between the IP multicast and an application layer multicast, the major differences, such as multicast is a bandwidth conserving one, where basically the router actually makes copies of the messages and sends them forward, but the source just sends one single message forward. On the other hand, in application layer multicast, multiple copies of messages are made by the source itself and sent over to the destinations. And that's the reason why IP multicast is brought bandwidth conserving. On the other hand, application layer is not bandwidth conserving, right? It takes up a lot of bandwidth. So these are 2 differences that you need to remember. Now, other than that, you need to know the 2 distribution trees, the 2 kinds of distribution trees, the source tree and the shared tree, and how they work. Right, so the source tree, basically there is a new spanning tree formed every time there is a new source, and in a shared tree the rendezvous point remains constant, and any source can actually send a message to the rendezvous point, and there is a still tree. So you need to know how these 2 work. We went over that in the class. All right, so application layer multicast, there's not much. You just need to know the difference between the IP multicast and the application layer multicast. Now moving on, you need to know the definitions of the 3 kinds of ordered multicasts. You need to know what a total order multicast is, what a causal order multicast is, and what a local order multicast is. You need to know the definitions of all these 3. You should be able to describe in your own words. Once again, you won't be expected to explain to give me exactly what is in the textbook or in the slides, but you do need to be able to explain it to me in your own words. Okay. Now the next one is the basic multicast using a sequencer. You do need to know how this algorithm works and how the sequencer works. So this is another algorithm that you need to know how it works. You should be able to describe this in your own words. All right. So the first one was the basic multicast, and then now the second one is the basic multicast, which uses a sequencer, right? So these two algorithms, you need to know how they work, and you should be able to explain in your own words. Okay, so when it comes to the two-phase commit method of ordered multicast, there may be a problem-solving question. So you don't need to remember the algorithm. However, you do need to know how the algorithm works, because there may be a problem-solving question. So you could be given a figure like the one on the slide right now, and you can be given timestamps, and you should be able to tell what is the commit timestamp that is received by each of the processes, and what is the order of the processes in each of the processes queues. Right, so what order are they placed into the queues, awaiting in the queues, right? So those kind of you can expect those kind of problem solving questions when it comes to two-phase commit problem. Now, once again, I would not say you need to memorize this algorithm for the total order multicast. However, you do need to know how it works, because there can be a problem solving question. Now, once again, there can be a problem-solving question of implementing the causal order multicast using the vector clocks. And we did one of these problems in class where you had to tell whether a message could be received at a given point of time or not. So there can be a question where you have a figure like it's shown on the slides, and you're asked if a given message can be received at a given point of time as shown in the figure, right? And by using the two constraints for the vector clock and the local vector clock, you should be able to tell whether the message can be received at this point of time or it has to be buffered. All right, so you have to give the answer and the reason as to why it should be buffered and why it can be received. All right, so you can expect a possible problem-solving question from the causal order multicast. All right, so moving forward, you don't need to remember these theorems, right? And so yes, you do need to know how to implement a scalable, reliable multicast. So we talked about three ways in which a multicast can be scalable as well as reliable. So you have to know all these three ways of providing a scalable and reliable way multicast using negative acknowledgements and waiting a random period of time before you send back negative acknowledgements, and storing some of the messages in some selective points. So all these three ways are basically ways to provide scalable, reliable multicast, and you need to remember all these three ways. So you could be asked a question on these, and you should be able to explain in your own words. All right. Okay. Now moving forward, you should know what an open group is, right? And moving forward, you can have a question on view, so you don't need to remember the rules, you don't need to remember the the three agreement, integrity, and validity rules for the view synchronous communication. However, you do need to understand them because there will be questions as on this slide where you can be given a scenario where a message is sent out and let's say some of the processes crash, and there can be questions on whether a message should be received before the view or the view should be received before the message or vice versa. So you can be asked given different possibilities, and you can be asked a question which of the possibilities are acceptable, right? So in order to answer these questions, however, you do need to understand the rules of the view synchronous communication, but you will not be asked to write down the rules of the view synchronous communication. Now, you do not need to study the part on trances. This was just a open project that is still ongoing that we just talked about a little bit, but you do not need to understand or study on the trances project at all for the final exam. So I guess this is where I'm going to stop, and this was the review for the chapter on multicast. I'm going to go ahead and post a review for each of the chapters